Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share Wendigo encounter horror stories. First story. A strange creature in the woods is stalking me. I shouldn't have gone hiking in the forest by my house, but it was hot out and I want to dip my feet in the creek. I had just started my lunch break when I squeezed through the gap in the chain link fence, cut through the trees, and found the water. That's when I heard a disturbing sound come from the bushes. Cock-crack. It sounded like something being ripped apart, like bones, or cock-crack. I knelt behind a tree, glanced over my surroundings to witness something huge framed between two pines, hunched over its prey in mid-feast. I couldn't tell what it was, but it had horns, a long snout, and an arched back like it had endured years of hard labor. Whatever it was feasting on something. I remained frozen, completely shocked by what I was seeing. It wasn't a grizzly bear or a mountain lion. Cock-crack, cock-crack. The animal devoured its catch, ravenous. I waited several seconds, then crept away, careful to not make any noise. I'd barely crawled out from the fence when I heard, "What are you doing in there?" I spun around and saw Ralph, my cranky war veteran neighbor. He was still in his bathrobe and slippers, sipping a mug of coffee. "Ralph," I gasped. "I saw something in the woods." "You're not supposed to be back there." "I know, but it was big like a bear." "Why, yes." "Hunched over." "Uh-huh." "Had horns." I nodded. "What you saw was the jabber. Don't ever go back there. If it knows you've seen it, it'll hunt you down and kill you." "What?" Ralph shoved past me and continued on his walk. I was so shocked. I didn't know how to respond. On my way back home, I wondered, did that really happen? What was that animal? Why did Ralph know so much about it? That afternoon, I paced in my living room, contemplating Ralph's words. If it knows you've seen it, it'll hunt you down and kill you. I tried to remember what he called it. The jabber. But what was a jabber? I remembered the stories from my childhood, a legend forced on us kids to make us compliant. I rushed my office, started searching online. I was shocked to see thousands of gruesome, horrifying pictures. Each in some way looked like a cross between a wolf and a Wendigo. Beneath one photo was the text, "Old Winter Legend." This specific picture looked like the creature I saw, but it couldn't be possible. These things weren't real, right? The next morning, I visited the Historical Society. I wanted to ask the owners about this animal. The place was run by an old winter named Whitehorn. I found him in the back organizing books. "Excuse me, sir," I said, trying not to appear desperate. "I'm looking for information on an old winter legend." "Ah, yes. Very popular subject." Whitehorn set down his book. "Which legend?" "The jabber." As soon as the words left my mouth, his eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "The jabber." His eyes turned cold, with an expression more serious than death. "Did it see you?" "No." "Does it know you're looking for it?" "I don't think so." He shoved me to the door. "Wait, I want to know." "Go home and pray it never finds you." Bam! He shut the door after me, flipped the sign to closed. That night, while sautéing dinner and ruminating over the day's events, I heard my sliding door open. Cock-creak. My body tensed. I reached for a knife. Cock-creak. I poked my head into the living room. It was Ralph. "Ralph, what are you?" "Sit down." He had a shotgun in his arms. "Why do you have a gun?" "I need to tell you something." We moved into the garage. Ralph made sure the door was locked and the windows covered. He spoke in frightened whispers, like he'd been keeping a secret for years and was about to explode. "What I'm about to say cannot leave this room. Understand?" I nodded vigorously. "It's about the thing you saw." He paused. "Years ago, this place used to be winter country. When the white man came and drove the people away, something evil took their place. The jabber." Just hearing the name made Ralph flinch. "This creature lives in the woods. It's a manifestation of the Wintu's hate. If you're lucky, It'll move on to the next wilderness area before it realizes you've seen it. Just make sure you don't tell anyone about it. The monster demands secrecy, so that's why no one talks about it. Everyone who does ends up dead. If the jabber knows you've seen it, it'll kill you. Why hasn't it hurt you? Ralph smirked and lifted his shirt to expose a nasty scar. It tried once, but I gave it a headache it never forgot. He tapped the shotgun at his side. But here's the real secret. He pulled a purple crystal out of his pocket. An old friend gave me this. It wards off evil spirits. He offered it to me. I keep them all over the house. Seems like you'll be needing some now. After we finished talking, I let Ralph out the back. He pressed a finger to his lips. Remember, stay quiet. We don't need any more problems in the community. Any more problems? I thought, how has this thing lived here for so long? How have I just now seen it? Ralph waved goodbye and meandered down the street. I watched him disappear, then returned to my kitchen, finished dinner, and got ready for bed. Around 10 p.m., I heard a blood-chilling scream. Then a gunshot. I raced outside to find neighbors scrambling up and down our street. I swiveled my gaze to each house. Then I saw it. An ambulance parked outside Ralph's place. I rushed over to June, my next-door neighbor. She was clutching her chest, petrified beyond belief. I don't know what happened. I heard Ralph rambling about something. Then he shot himself. I noticed she was wearing a necklace with a large purple crystal. An amethyst. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the gem Ralph had given me. Coroners emerged from Ralph's house, pushing a cart with a body bag. I couldn't believe it. I had just talked with him. He didn't seem suicidal. After consoling June, I crept back into my driveway, mortified. I glanced back at Ralph's house, sorrow filling my lungs. I could see something on the roof, almost hidden in the shadows. I could barely make it out, but I swear, it had large horns, a hunched back, and a long snout. It was looking right at me. Second story, The Wendigo of Blackwater Bay. Chapter 1, Arrival. The November wind off Lake Superior was a knife through Ethan's parka. He tightened the drawstrings and stepped from the ferry onto Blackwater Island's creaking dock. The lake churned slate gray, swallowing the horizon in mist. Last trip till spring, the ferryman said, leaning on the rail. Storms will ice the bay any day now. You sure you want to be out here? Ethan forced a smile. I need the solitude. The ferryman grunted. Solitude's what you'll get. Maybe more than you want. Ethan's boots crunched along the frozen path toward the cabin he'd rented for his rider's retreat. The island was all pine and granite, a smear of black rock and skeletal birch. As dusk thickened, he swore he heard a low whistle threading the trees. Too long, too mournful for wind alone. Inside the cabin, the propane heater groaned to life. He unpacked his laptop, but words refused to come. The sound returned, a drawn-out moan, like a flute made of bone. Ethan pressed his ear to the frosted window. Only forest and the black mirror of the lake stared back. Chapter 2, Legends in the Pines. Morning brought weak sunlight and a brittle crust of snow. Ethan hiked to the island's only store, a leaning shack smelling of kerosene. Behind the counter, an Ojibwe woman in a heavy sweater watched him with eyes like polished onyx. "You're the writer," she said, not a question. "You came for the stories." Ethan blinked. How did you know?" "People don't come here unless they're looking for something. Sometimes it finds them first." He asked about local legends, expecting fish tales and shipwreck ghosts. She hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "My grandmother told of the Wendigo, a spirit of the North Woods. Hunger without end. It hunts in winter when the lakes are iron and the sky has no sun. Tall as a tree, skin stretched over bone, heart of ice. Smells of death and pine sap." Ethan smiled politely. "A cannibal monster?" Her gaze sharpened. "Not a monster. A warning. The cold can change a man. Make him eat what he loves. When you hear the whistle, you run. The bell above the door jingled. A blast of cold followed, an old fisherman inside. He eyed Ethan, muttered something in Ojibwe, and crossed himself. The woman's voice was a whisper. The Wendigo likes newcomers. Chapter 3, Footprints. That night a storm clawed the island. Snow fell in blinding sheets. Ethan woke to silence, so deep it roared in his ears. Then, a crunch outside the cabin. He peered through the window. The moon broke through clouds, painting the drift silver. Across the yard, footprints. Huge, each step half a yard long, toes elongated like claws. Heart hammering, he grabbed his flashlight and opened the door. The air sliced his lungs. The prints led from the tree-line to his porch and stopped. No prints leaving. Nothing but that endless, frozen lake. The whistle came again, closer now, spiraling through the timber like a cry from the throat of winter itself. Chapter 4, The Howl of Hunger. Ethan barricaded the door with furniture. All night the sound prowled the cabin walls, scraping, a low growl threaded with something human. He thought of the legend, hunger without end. At dawn he found his food stores torn open, meat shredded though the door remained locked. A smear of frost burned across the floor like the trail of dry ice. He radioed the mainland. Static answered. Desperate, he trekked toward the store for help. The woods felt animate, branches twitching in windless air. Then he smelled it, rot and iron. A figure moved between the birches, gaunt, impossibly tall, ribs protruding through parchment skin. Antlers jutted from a skull stretched with leathery flesh. Its eyes glowed a pitiless yellow. The Wendigo tilted its head, breath steaming black. When it opened its mouth, the whistle shrieked, a sound of knives and starvation. Ethan ran. Chapter 5, Frozen Pursuit. Snow swallowed his tracks as quickly as he made them. Behind him came the crunch of colossal feet. He dared a glance. The creature loped with inhuman grace, knees bending wrong, claws grazing trunks and leaving trails of frozen sap. He plunged toward the store. But when he reached the clearing, the building was silent, door ripped from its hinges. Inside, shelves lay splintered. The Ojibwe woman's scarf lay in the snow, stiff with blood. The old fisherman's body hung from the rafters, frozen eyes wide with terror. Etched in frost across the wall. Hunger. Ethan staggered back into the store while rising. He followed the shoreline, hoping to reach the dock. The lake was half frozen, great plates of ice grinding like teeth. The Wendigo's whistle echoed from every direction, a chorus of mockery. Chapter 6, Blackwater Bay. Night fell early. Ethan reached the dock to find the ferry gone, mooring ropes shredded as though gnawed. Across the bay, a single light winked his cabin, but between him and safety stretched a field of shifting ice. The wind carried a new sound, a voice, faint but familiar. His late wife, calling his name. Ethan, tears froze on his cheeks. "You're not real," he whispered. The Wendigo emerged from the trees, towering against the moon. Its antlers scraped the stars. Ethan stepped onto the ice. Cracks spiderweb beneath him. The creature followed, weightless despite its size, gliding as though the lake abated. Halfway across, the ice groaned and split. Water like liquid knives surged up, dragging him under. Chapter 7, Hunger Without End. Darkness, then cold beyond death. Ethan kicked upward, lungs burning, and broke the surface. The moon was gone. Only the Wendigo's yellow eyes pierced the storm. A claw closed around his arm, ice-searing flesh. Images flooded his mind. Endless winters, men devouring their kin, the taste of raw marrow. A hunger that could never be filled. "Join," it rasped, voice like cracking timber. Feet. Ethan's body betrayed him. He felt his teeth ache, stomach knot with ravenous craving. The scent of meat, his own, drove him mad. With a final shred of will, he drew the hunting knife from his belt and plunged it into the creature's chest. The Wendigo shrieked, a sound of glaciers shattering. It released him and sank beneath the ice, the lake swallowing its scream. Ethan crawled onto a floe, shivering, vision dimming. Epilogue: Spring Thaw. Weeks later, the first fairy of spring found a man on the island's rocky shore. His hair had gone white. His eyes burned with a hungry yellow gleam. They took him to the mainland hospital. He said little, only that something still called to him when the wind came from the north. Nurses whispered that he never ate the food they brought. Yet at night, the morgue reported missing bodies, bones scraped clean. On certain winter nights, when the Great Lakes freeze and the sky glows iron gray, locals swear they hear a long, mournful whistle drifting across the water, followed by the crunch of enormous footsteps. The Wendigo of Blackwater Bay is never sated. Third story. Our mom's desire to become one with nature is getting unsettling. My mom insisted we spend the holidays at our cabin in the woods. She said it was the perfect place to become one with nature. I never liked it there. The cabin was old and creaky, buried under fresh snow that made everything silent and eerie. But my sister, Tori, didn't mind at all. She'd sit by the fireplace, flipping through Mom's worn-out fairy tales, her eyes shining like she knew a secret. One evening, as the shadows outside grew long and dark, Tori stared out the window. "Do you think Mom's stories are true?" she whispered, her breath fogging up the glass. I looked up from my book. "They're just stories," I said, trying to sound confident. "But what if something's out there?" she asked again, her voice barely audible. A chill ran down my spine, but I shrugged it off. "You're letting your imagination run wild," I replied, forcing a smile. That night, Tori begged me to go into the forest with her. "Just for a little while," she pleaded. "I want to see if we can hear anything." I didn't want to go, but the look in her eyes made it hard to refuse. Reluctantly, I bundled up and we stepped out into the cold. The snow crunched under our boots as we walked into the trees. The forest was thick and dark, the branches above twisting together like a web. The paths we knew so well seemed different, like the woods had shifted when we weren't looking. "See, it's just trees and snow," I said, rubbing my arms to keep warm. Tori didn't answer. She was listening intently, her head tilted to the side. "Wait," she whispered. "Do you hear that?" I stopped and strained to listen. At first, there was only the sound of the wind sighing through the branches. Then, faintly, a whistle threaded through the air. It was a haunting sound, low and hollow, that sent a shiver through me. "It's just the wind," I said, but my voice shook. The whistle came again, clearer this time. It seemed to wrap around us, drawing us deeper into the woods. Before I could stop her, Tori stepped forward. "Maybe it's someone who needs help," she said, her eyes wide. "Wait." I reached out to grab her, but she moved too quickly, slipping between the trees. Panic gripped me as she disappeared from sight. "Tori," I shouted, my voice echoing. The only answer was the whistle, now sounding like a mocking tune. I stumbled after her, the shadows pressing in. The trees seemed to close around me, their branches scratching at my clothes. My heart pounded in my chest. Then I saw it. In a clearing bathed in cold moonlight stood a towering figure. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. Its body was thin and stretched, limbs bending at unnatural angles. Huge antlers twisted from its head, seeming to swallow the light and cloak it in darkness. Its eyes were empty holes, and from its jagged mouth came the haunting whistle. I stood frozen as it turned toward me. "Brooke," it whispered, my name distorted and echoing in the stillness. Fear rooted me to the spot. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The creature took a step closer, its movements smooth and eerie. Somehow, I found the strength to turn and run. Branches tore my clothes and scratched my face as I fled. The whistle chased me, wrapping around me like a cold wind. I burst into the cabin, slamming the door behind me. "Mom!" I cried out, gasping for breath. The house was dark and silent. We need to, it's out there," I stammered, tears blurring my vision. A soft sound came from the back porch. Heart pounding, I crept toward it. Through the window, I saw her standing there, her back to me. Her body shook slightly, shadows swirling around her feet. "Mom!" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She turned slowly. Her eyes met mine, but they weren't the warm eyes I knew. They were hollow and empty, just like the creature's. A chilling smile spread across her face. "You're home, dear," she said, her voice layered with that haunting whistle. "We've been waiting for you." Behind her, Tori stepped into view. She moved stiffly, like a puppet on strings. Her eyes were vacant, and as she opened her mouth, the whistle filled the room, echoing off the walls. I stumbled back, my stomach twisting with fear. The cabin seemed to close in on me, the shadows stretching into monstrous shapes. It hit me all at once. The creature wasn't just in the woods. It was here, inside my home, wearing the faces of my family. Fourth story. I'm related to a Wendigo. Sorry if the title seems abrupt. After reading this, it'll make sense. I hope. You've heard this story a million times before. I'm a teenager who recently moved to Minnesota. So recently, in fact, I can barely remember the town's name. Just search for generic towns on any search engine, and I'm certain it'll show up. I'm not going to try avoiding exposition because I feel inclined to share this information with as many online strangers as I can. I moved into the town a month ago with my mom and dad. I lived in Virginia before, so adapting to Minnesota was not something I was thrilled about. I had to leave the few friends I had. My parents assured me that I would find people to hang out with. I didn't really need any friends. I worked better alone. My parents let me bring my Xbox, but I believe they hoped I would leave it behind. Apparently, we moved here because my grandpa died. We are inheriting his fortune. When I first left the car, I set my eyes on the house. No, my house. I had to live there. It was a shack, if anything. It was a one-story house with faded log walls and a drywall interior. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room/kitchen, a bathroom, and an attic. My dad quickly monopolized the kitchen for his work. His laptop never left the island in the kitchen. My mom looked for a job around town. I explored the bleak house, hoping to find something fun. "I'm bored." I complained to my dad. He shrugged. "There's plenty of things to do around here. Go shopping, go explore the woods. Find people to hang out with." "Wow, thanks for the help," I said, masking the sarcasm in my voice. The look he gave me told me I wasn't hiding it well. Maybe I didn't want to. I expected Grandpa's fortune to be grander, but what did I know? I never met him, at least when I was sentient. My dad raised his hand and gestured towards his birthmark, 2 red splotches on the palm. "This mark means you're a son of the Barkley family. If you embarrass yourself, you're embarrassing your bloodline," he insisted. I rolled my eyes, being intentionally rebellious. "You've said that a million times. I don't care anymore. Just go somewhere, I have a call," my father said, shooing me away like an animal. I grabbed my coat and went out the door. I walked down the sidewalk of the bustling town. The cars slowly drove past, their exhaust pipes producing fog in the cold, winter air. Everything foul here was fair in its own way. I guess their fumes propelled them towards their goal somehow. Unlike me, who was aimlessly walking until something interesting happened. I stumbled on the icy sidewalk before grabbing on to a streetlight. I heard snickering behind me. I turned to see a group of 3 teenagers. "You new here?" one asked, pulling his beanie over his ears. I nodded, nervously rubbing the outline of my birthmark on my left hand. Well, in that case, my name is James. He held out his gloved hand. I shook it politely. He examined me closely, his freckles seemingly popping out of his pale face in the cold. You really are new. I only assumed as much because you almost took a tumble there. He gestured towards the ground. I'm not the most graceful. I said, anyway, who were the others with you? I asked. James turned to look at the other two teens. This guy here is Kyle. Upon hearing his name, he gave me a flimsy wave. Kyle had messy blonde hair and was taller than the other two. He could pass for a surfer if he had a tan, which he didn't. The other person was a girl. She quickly introduced herself as Lucy. She had long, slightly curly hair, a wide face, and an expression I could only summarize as irritation. Can we go now? She asked James. Not yet. We gotta welcome the guy. There ain't many kids around here, remember? He said. Lucy scowled. Our group is fine. We don't need anyone else to hang out with. She wrapped her scarf around her neck. Kyle shrugged. I don't care what he does. Wait a minute. What's your name anyway? He turned to me. My name is Drew. Andrew, if you're feeling brave. I said jokingly. All right, Andrew. Lucy said, her voice dripping with venom. We have to go now. What did I do to this woman? I didn't understand. James gave me an apologetic look. I guess we better be going. James said, wait, one more thing. I interjected. He turned around and raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to elaborate. Where's the candy store? I asked. Kyle pointed to a store on the other side of the street as they left. They were a bit standoffish, but at least they weren't pricks. I crossed the street, entered the candy store, and purchased an overpriced bag of nameless gummy worms. I left the store, pushing open the glass door as the bell rang. I wandered through the town, mapping every building as I got closer to the woods. I reached the border between the town and the forest. The trees were bare, devoid of leaves. Even still, the forest seemed thick and unforgiving. I stepped into the woods and wandered aimlessly. The bitter winter air nipped at my nose and cheeks, making me regret not wearing a scarf. Hello, a voice called out from the darkness. I perked up at the sudden voice. Who's there? I asked, realizing too late that my voice was unsteady and nervous. Not a good first impression on my end. I don't know who you are, the voice said. I tilted my head, trying to get the unknown person to see my confusion. Where are you? I asked the woods. The cold breeze stirred dead leaves past me. You are new. It spoke once again. Its voice was mystical, as if blending with the wind. Maybe it was the wind looking back. Even so, it spoke words I could understand. I chewed on a sour gummy worm. I am hungry, the wind said. I held out a gummy worm. Do you want some of my food? I asked. I don't know why I even bothered talking to whatever it was. The voice paused as if it was thinking. A rattling sound echoed through the forest. Maybe it was a woodpecker. I'm starving. Its voice lowered, sounding raspy. I tossed the bag of candy into the forest, wasting $13. I gave him my food. Eat all you want. I heard loud footsteps crunching in the snow. Tick, tick, clack, clack. Unknown sounds echoed through the forest. The footsteps came closer. A dog rushed past me from behind, barking into the woods. I looked down, startled slightly at the Labrador. It barked aggressively, its tail pointed upright. An older man rushed over to the dog, grabbing its collar. He turned to me. Sorry, kid, he said. Mabel gets loose too often, but I always know to find her here. He chuckled. He went silent and turned to the forest. A bird called out from the woods. He grimaced. Kid, he turned to me. Don't go in there. Hunters could shoot you on accident. You could get lost. You could even drown in the lake. Stay very well away. I nodded. What about the guy in the forest? Isn't he in danger too? His expression grew concerned. There's nobody in there. The wind whistles through the thick branches. It sounds almost like voices, he said. I felt like he didn't believe in his own reasoning. He sighed. You new here, he observed. I confirmed his statement. He cleared his throat, petting his dog's yellow fur. Listen up then. These woods aren't safe, but his expression darkened. It can at times be safer than the town. I insisted he elaborate. The town has frequent famines. Food spoils and berries stop being as plentiful. We don't get a lot of imports either. When we get bad storms, we have to rely on stored canned goods. It isn't nearly as bad as it once was. Even if food is readily available, the danger is still there. What do you mean? I asked. I'm saying that people abandon their humanity. They eat each other when everything dries up. There isn't always a justification to it. People just snap. I was at a loss for words. He sighed. It isn't like that anymore. We haven't had an incident in 5 years. So why warn me? I asked. He paused. Because it isn't going to stop, as long as it still breathes. He muttered, looking at the forest. I asked. It lives in the woods. It never bothered people physically, just cursed them away. Until a few months ago, that is. We've started to distance our kids from the forest where it lives. Mabel whimpered and dropped her tail low. I groaned. What is it? I said, getting impatient. I wasn't willing to hear a vague campfire story. It's a Wendigo, a beast of Indian, native folklore. Do you know what they are? He asked. I nodded. I've seen YouTube videos on them, even read a few books. You think a cryptid is out there? He stared into the forest. Absolutely. They don't believe me. But as long as one person believes, the Wendigo will be more cautious in its approach. You came here not long after the old man died. Why is that? He asked me. If you're referring to Clarence Barkley, he's my grandfather. I explained. My condolences, the man said. No worries, I never knew him anyway. I said reassuringly. The trees creaked and branches snapped. A strong gust of wind blew past. Oh, he said. Good for you. Was he an asshole? I asked. He shrugged. He was entitled and snobby, as most rich people are. He was usually secluded, though. The man explained. He rarely came into town, and when he did, it was usually to buy meat. Lots of meat. Apparently, my grandfather was aloof. He stayed out of everyone's way when he could. He wasn't the nicest when people met him, though. So, why did you ask why I came here? I asked. Nobody ever comes here unless they have something to gain from it. I'm assuming you were claiming his will. Yeah, that's about it. I said. The man exhaled and watched the trees. Do you know how to become a Wendigo? He asked me. I haven't really tried before. I said sarcastically. But I do know how they come to be. Good. Try not to lose yourself. If you get hungry, eat whatever you can find. If you want more personal things, pray to God. Be happy with what you have. The man said, I'm familiar with that stuff. I'm a good person, or I try to be. I explained. The man chuckled. Just keep it in mind. Mabel tucked her tail between her legs and whimpered as she stared into the forest. The old man sighed. Looks like I should head back. He waved goodbye as he walked his dog home. I went home after that. I entered the house, knocked off my boots, and peeled away at my winter gear until I was back into my casual attire. My father was busy on his computer, picking up work calls. He groaned. God damn it. This is not the right time for a prank call. He stormed off, dropping the phone on the table. I heard the bathroom door slam shut. I crept over to the phone and held it to my ear curiously. On the other end was static. How was it a prank call? It could be an accidental dial. The phone suddenly picked up a new sound. It sounded like TV static, but it increased in volume slowly. After about 10 seconds, the sound was a deafening screech. I hung up the phone. I decided to snoop around the house, looking for any stuff left behind. I wish we inherited the mansion, but the repair costs would double our debt. I blew the dust off of an old laptop someone left for some reason. It was even plugged in and fully charged. I turned on a laptop. Despite being a newer model, The laptop only had retro games. I decided to play Doom instead. If this computer belonged to my grandpa, he had good taste. After 30 minutes of Doom, I played some sort of deer hunting game. It was 3D, but very primitive for a 3D game. The deer were basically advanced polygons. I aimed my cursor at a moving deer, causing it to activate a cutscene of the bullet traveling towards the deer. Before the bullet hit, the color of the screen inverted and crackled with a buzzing static. The deer's peaceful black eyes glowed white, its face almost twisted into a sadistic smile. Of course, it was just a weird glitch. The deer's antlers multiplied in size as the 3D model began to lose its form. The computer shut itself off. I sighed and stuffed the laptop into a drawer. I was going to get it fixed eventually, so I don't have to buy any duplicate games on my Xbox. Over the next few weeks, everything just got worse. The voice in the wilderness kept talking, although by now I had ignored it completely. Everything was fine until it said my name. I walked by the forest entrance to go to school and meet up with my friends and Lucy. Andrew, the voice called out like a taunting child. I froze and turned to the forest. What do you know my name? The words sat on the edge of my tongue. At the last moment, I held those words back. If I gave the thing any attention, I would surely regret it. The wind rattled the dead branches like some sort of bony wind chime. The icy air felt like daggers on my skin. I walked away, resuming my travels. Andrew, it rasped. I ignored it. You've grown so much since the last time I saw you, it said clear as day. I continued to walk away. It was just saying that to get my attention, whatever it was. This Wendigo has been a pain for quite some time. I wasn't going to give it the satisfaction. It went silent as I walked away. As I walked down the road, I noticed a dead deer on the curb. I walked around it, but a few minutes later, that task would be impossible. The entire road was flooded with dead deer. Piles upon piles of corpses littered the streets, bleeding into the drainage systems. Even getting near the pile sent an overwhelming stench towards me. I vomited in the grass. The putrid odor rattled my systems and brought me to my knees. The corpses were suddenly dragged one by one into the bushes. My head pounded as I tried my best to get away. I felt a lanky, cold hand grab my ankle and drag me away slowly. I turned around to see white eyes staring at me from the bushes, concealed in the morning darkness. The extended bony arm tugged weakly. The silver eyes never left me. Its translucent, pale skin crinkled with every movement, as if it was too tight for its own body. The faint outline of its humanoid face made me wish I was dead beforehand. I dug my nails into the concrete road, desperately trying to anchor myself. As I was dragged closer to the bushes, I could see its disgusting human teeth emerge from the shadows to devour me. I used my free leg to kick the face of the hollow creature. It groaned in pain and released me. I made a mad dash for the school, stumbling over the corpses of deer. When I assumed I was safe, I turned around to see the largest deer in the pile being dismembered by the arms. The head was ripped off with a sound I could only compare to a tree snapping. That deer must have lived for at least a decade. Now, its elder antlers were being brandished by an imposter. I made it to school, which probably wasn't the best idea. I was so distracted by what just happened that it didn't occur to me that I was covered in deer blood. The classroom shrieked in fear, dragging me out of my brain-dead state. I was brought into the counselor's office for questioning. They didn't believe my story until they looked out the window. Of course, I never mentioned the actual Wendigo. I just said that a herd of deer died, which wasn't false, but not completely true either. I was certain it was the Wendigo. It was starving and undoubtedly bloodthirsty. It was also cold. Its touch was like the pole of a stop sign in winter. They eventually gave me some temporary clothes and sent me on my way. In third period, an ear-splitting scream rang from the forest. It sounded like a mix of a human, elk, and electronic static. It was impossibly loud, causing us to plug in headphones or cover our ears. The sound continued for the next week. Our town adapted quickly. We learned some basic hand signals and got very good at understanding body language. The town became barren of all animals. Deer had migrated to a new area. Dogs fled to find safety, ending up in ditches or dumpsters. I found Mabel under my bed, which scared the hell out of me. I was sitting on my couch while my mom motioned for me to take out my earbuds. I was greeted with the sound of silence. I almost teared up in joy. Authorities investigated the source of the sound with no success. They couldn't even blame anything. The mayor eventually told the town not to worry about it. To no one's surprise, everyone kept worrying about it. I wandered through the cold town. I bought candy, as usual, and went on with my day. James, Kyle, and Lucy intercepted me. Long time no see. James said to me, "We thought it was you that was screaming all week," he said jokingly. "What do you want from me?" I said, realizing too late that it sounded rude and confrontational. Luckily, James didn't pick up on the change of tone. "We want to go exploring." Kyle said, "They want you to come with them." It wasn't my idea. Lucy said, "Thanks." I said, "So where are we going?" "We're going to go to the old mansion in the woods. It'll be just like one of those old movies." "You in?" James said excitedly. Every instinct I had knew to decline his offer. No sane person would randomly wander into the woods. That's not only dangerous, but stupid. "Sure, I'll go." Lucy sighed, likely hoping I would decline. I'm not the best at understanding social cues, so I have no clue why this chick was so pissed at me. Maybe she had a crush on me. That would be cool. "When are we going?" I asked. "Now." James answered quickly. I didn't bother asking if they had all the supplies. Lucy had a comically large backpack strapped onto her shoulders. Despite being shorter than all of us, she was the strongest by far. What a terrifying combination. We made our way through the frozen forest. The only sound we heard was our footsteps. When we got closer to the manor, we occasionally heard disembodied voices conversing from somewhere in the woods. "Are others here?" I asked nervously. It occurred to me that this was my grandfather's house. At least it looked much better in the pictures. The windows weren't boarded up back then. Those voices are always there. Kyle said as we reached the front porch. We opened the door, which was strangely unlocked. At least it made me feel less uneasy about breaking into my grandfather's house. When we entered the manor, I realized why my family had our own house. The mansion was run down, overwhelmed with cobwebs and deep scrapes in the wood. It looked as if a bear had been living here. Lucy aimed the flashlight around, the bright light waving in the darkness. The light reflected off of a bleached deer skull with large antlers that had been mounted on the wall. We went up the stairs. The door to the bathroom was locked. Lucy slammed into the door, snapping it in half. We ducked under the broken door and stared into the bathtub. The entire tub was filled with decayed chicken bones and decomposed meat. "Geez, the old man was a glutton," James remarked. Bones were haphazardly thrown around the bathroom. We dug through the pile, looking for something of value. There was nothing. Kyle scoffed. Maybe he took his money to the grave. "We aren't digging him up, are we?" I asked. "There's no body." James said, "Even his death is shrouded in mystery," he said ominously, expecting a fearful reaction from one of us. Kyle exhaled. "It isn't as deep as you make it seem." Dead branches tapped against the window. The cold breeze made the house feel somewhat smaller. I couldn't help but notice that the tree looked off. It was like one of those insects that look like leaves. They look like a leaf, but they're alive. We continued snooping around the rooms, splitting up along the way. I went back to the front door and began to close it, as we had left it open before. The voice called out from the forest. "You heard my call." It spoke. I closed the door. I chose to ignore it as usual. I was desensitized to it at this point. It hasn't done much to me so far, so I doubt it could deal any real damage. It continued talking as I walked away from the door. I snooped around for a bit longer. Nothing gathered my interest. For a mansion, it was absolutely disgusting. The door rattled as the wind beat against it. I should have known better then. Blaming things on the wind only got me so far. From upstairs, I watched with bated breath as the doorknob clicked and opened. The room grew cold, and a draft embraced me. Snow glistened against the dusty carpet. The door creaked open completely. Standing on the porch was something I couldn't begin to explain. It had two long, emaciated legs. It could be human, but the hooves denied my reasoning. Massive bony hands hung down from its body, its slender fingers twitching and clicking claws together. Multicolored fur coated most of the body in brutal patches, like a shaven dog. No, it was as if it put the fur on itself. One hooved foot tapped against the floor as it began to step inside. As it crouched down, I could see its exposed rib cage hugging a sack of organs weakly inside it. Before I could view its visage, I backed away from the upstairs balcony and into a bedroom. I peeked behind the doorway, waiting for something to happen. The long hand rose from under the balcony. It reached for the skull mounted on the wall. The skull disconnected and fell down into the large hands of the entity. After a brief period of silence, the antlers rose from behind the edge of the balcony. The two hands gripped onto the fence as the thing pulled its whole mass up. The skull was no decoration, it was a mask. The deer skull looked as dead as ever. The eye sockets were empty except for a tiny silver light in each eye. The carpet near the thing froze. The thing's eyes never left me as it stretched its hand closer to me. It was almost like the arm was extending according to the will of the life form, if you could even call it a life form. I breathed heavily, fear washing over. My breath escaped my lips, small clouds of warm steam. I was so concentrated on the Wendigo that I forgot I hadn't come here alone. Kyle had appeared in the doorway, staring at the starving creature. It was so hungry, I just knew it. My primal instincts told me to feed it. I extended my hand hesitantly. The Wendigo directed its clawed hand to me. My finger nudged the cold keratin as we connected. "Drew," Kyle squeaked. I slowly turned to him. Kyle backed away from the balcony. The Wendigo pressed the side of its face against the fence, its mouth agape. I could see the humanoid mouth behind the deer skull dripping with saliva. Its silver eye peered at me. It panted and groaned, trying to inch closer to me. "Drew, stop," Kyle pleaded. I stared at him blankly. The Wendigo knocked over a coffee table, shattering some sort of glass object as it pressed itself against the upstairs balcony. A hand gripped my wrist and yanked me away. I turned to see Lucy scowling at me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed. I hadn't noticed her when I entered the room, so her startling me didn't help my situation. I explained to her that it felt natural, like putting your foot in a shoe or popping your back. It was instinctual. She looked at me like I was crazy. I couldn't blame her. The Wendigo panted, its swollen bovine tongue hanging out the side of its mouth. Lucy squeezed my wrist harder, then let go. "Fine. Be difficult for everyone. I personally don't care if you die or not." She sighed. "But they do." I wasn't sure what she meant. She noticed my confused expression. "You have friends, remember? They care about you. And since I care for them, I don't want them to be grief-stricken. They already have me." She frowned, realizing she said too much. I heard the voice of James shout in fear. The Wendigo turned to see him. Its inner mouth twisted into a frustrated grin. Its gums bled as the jaw squeezed shut. "Jesus," James said in terror. The Wendigo thrust its clawed finger at where I believed James was. I heard a cough, groan, and thud as James collapsed. It dragged James's corpse to the edge and picked it up. I heard the unmistakable sound of chewing, crunching, and ripping. I knew it was safe. I stood up and walked out of my hiding place, down the stairs, past the feeding creature, and out into the cold forest. I averted my gaze from the thing as it ate. I could hear the swaying of its bushy, matted tail. My fear suddenly returned when I left the mansion. My friend was being devoured messily by a beast of folklore. It almost killed me, and I let it. I heard a creak as Lucy and Kyle crept out of the building. The Wendigo gurgled and turned to face us. Its large body was barely illuminated in the dark mansion, yet the crimson blood was clearly visible pooling at its feet. The two looked up at me with a look of pure terror. They descended the porch stairs and stood behind me. The Wendigo stood up, its joints popping and cracking. A gurgle resonated deep in its maw as blood trickled out from its deer skull. Its fingers twitched with every movement. Paralyzed with fear, I could only stare as it made its way towards the front door. A picture frame fell from the wall and landed at the hoof of the starved creature. The Wendigo looked down, its massive antlers scraping against the drywall. It looked down at the shattered glass. The bleached skull reflected in the shards. Its piercing eyes hovered over the printed image. I cannot tell what it was, but the image seemed to provoke the entity. It groaned and slashed at the image, tearing it to shreds. The towering, emaciated forest spirit tilted its head and squeezed through the door. Yellow wallpaper hung from its antlers like confetti, occasionally glistening in the stray beams of sun leaking through the clouds. It shuffled closer, its hooves clacking on the wooden porch. The porch creaked and groaned under the weight of the Wendigo. It paused for a moment, its eyes scanning us curiously. It wobbled on its skinny legs and shuddered from the cold. My lips bled as they dried. We stood there for what felt like hours, waiting for the creature to do anything. We couldn't run from it or fight it. However, it didn't appear to want to kill us. Yet, the head stopped turning, its gaze directed at me. Kyle and Lucy watched me, waiting for my reaction. Frozen tears had solidified against their faces. "Why?" The Wendigo whispered, its mystical voice echoing like a divine spirit. I took a step back, startled. However, I remained silent. I wanted to know what it was about to say. "Why do you feel warm?" It spoke slowly, as if processing each word carefully before saying them. "Warm," I stuttered. The Wendigo's fingers twitched involuntarily. It hunched over, peering at me. He was cold when I recovered from him. The Wendigo's eyes darted towards the front door, now stained with blood. "But you are warm." I tried unsuccessfully to stop myself from shaking uncontrollably. The Wendigo breathed heavily, each breath an Arctic breeze. It thrust out a thin hand, slashing at me. Before my head was removed, the hand retracted, clutching onto its ribcage. Its long fingers grasped firmly on the chest, squeezing tightly. Startled, the Wendigo looked down at its arm. "He is resilient," the famine spirit whispered. "Same as you." It pointed to me, gently brushing my cheek with its claw. Something on its hand caught my eye. Right below the thumb, close to the palm, it had 2 red splotches. Birthmarks. The same birthmarks I had. It all made sense. My grandfather was greedy and self-centered. My parents didn't like inviting him to family meetings. He had no interest in me. Still, I didn't expect it to be that bad. The thing that has been pursuing me was my own grandfather. The Wendigo stared me down. It squeezed its own neck until it collapsed. Lucy and Kyle backed away. What? They tried reasoning with themselves. As the Wendigo began to move once more, we ran back to town. A part of me wanted to stay and comfort what was once my grandfather, even if he was trash. I knew that it wouldn't let me see my grandfather again. Clarence Barkley lived his life alone. He accumulated a large amount of money and died alone. The Wendigo took advantage of his greed. Somehow, my grandfather fused with the forest spirit to become a functional entity. That's my current theory, at least. The Wendigo was weak on its own, scrambling desperately to blend with the ecosystem as an autonomous life form. When it gained humanity, it yearned for more. For me, it's been a rough month. Every day, I watch the forest, waiting to hear a whisper or scream. I wait for something to happen. The Wendigo has not appeared since. My friends haven't showed up either, probably because I'm related to a Wendigo. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.